My name is Rohit Jhawar. I debated in congressional debate for 4 years, and I am now a coach and co-owner at Ascend Speech and Debate Academy. Today, I'm going to be answering the questions that y'all sent in for me about congressional debate. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start off with the first question, which is, how do you make lay judges interested when you try to win a bunch of things on the flow in a late round speech? So this is a pretty loaded question. So I'll say it one more time. How do you make lay judges interested when you try to win a bunch of things on the flow in a late round speech? Okay, so I think that you could break this down into really the question of what should a late round speech include? Because at the heart of this question, I think that the answer really is that a good flow speech, a speech that deals with content and the issues in the debate and refutations and all of those things on those lines, a speech that does that well is going to be interesting to any judge. So I think really this question is, how do you give a good late round speech? And I think that the answer here all relies upon how well you can flow the round and understand what's going on. So the first piece of advice I'd give you is, in any round that you're in, make sure you're flowing everything that everyone says. Okay? From then on, what you want to be able to do is identify what the biggest disagreements in the round are. And these are referred to as your clashes. So you want to figure out, what are the big clashes inside the round? What are the big disagreements that both sides are having? And are there any particular speakers that have defined any of these disagreements, whether it be that they have convincingly portrayed that one side is winning on them, or whether they're the ones that have posed the question in the first place, or anything along those lines. And you want to note those speakers. And then in your late round speech, basically what you want to do is get up there and answer the disagreement for me. I think a lot of late round speakers try to just go down the flow and refute every single person, but I don't personally think that's a great strategy, because not every single person is presenting arguments that are relevant to the question. So you want to be talking about that question in and of itself. How can you answer it for me? What new information can you give me? Is there a way that you can prove to me that definitively it is your side that is better on this disagreement than the other side, or vice versa? And that's essentially what you're trying to do in any good late round speech. If you can do that effectively, I think most lay judges are going to be pretty interested in your speech, because they also want to see the debate go down and they want to see a winner. And that's exactly what you're presenting to them if you structure the speech that way. Alrighty, cool. Let's move on to the next question. We'll take this one next. By what metrics would one value one clash over another? Okay, good question. So we just talked about what clashes were, and now we're wondering, how do you decide this clash is more important than the other one? Okay, so there's two different ways to do this. First of all, you can go contextually based upon the round, right? So what are the best speakers inside the round discussing? What speeches did you think were the most powerful? Which ones impressed you the most? And going based upon those metrics, you can think about, okay, this is the issue that that speaker, who I thought was amazing, who I thought gave a great speech, was talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and say that that is a big issue, and so on and so forth. And that's how you use contextual mechanisms to decide, okay, this is one clash that is more important than other clashes inside of this round. Alternatively, you could go completely based upon the content. And the way that this starts is way before the round even begins. It starts when you look at the piece of legislation. You should be able to determine that, okay, in this piece of legislation, there are these big issues that I think are going to define the debate. Normally, you're going to be able to find one or two per piece of legislation. And then the other ones that are issues are just semantic concerns that aren't actually the heart of the debate. And once you identify those concerns, those are what you value the most inside the round. So those are the clashes that you're really going to want to go for, and the clashes that you think are going to answer this round and answer why your side is specifically the one that's winning. So, in terms of an actual metric, I think the question you should always ask yourself is, if I win this, have I won the round? And you want to keep on searching for clashes until you find ones where the answer is a definitive yes. That yes, if I win this, I have won the round. Or at the very least, I have come much, much closer to winning the round, to proving that my side is better, to proving that ultimately you should be voting for the affirmation for the best outcome, or the negation for the best outcome. If that makes sense, you are on a good path to be able to value clashes inside rounds and prioritize what are the most important ones. Awesome. Let's move on to the next question. How do you avoid using debate terminology in round? I also got a similar question here that said, I've implicitly weighed and judges didn't catch on. They said specifically, weigh the argument explicitly. However, judges also say, don't use debate terminology. So, how do you balance this subtlety where you do what the judges want in terms of these heavy, flow heavy concepts of debate heavy ideas, but also maintain very accessible, normal rhetoric that people would use inside their daily lives? So let's talk about this. I think the answer here really determines your actual knowledge of debate terminology. How well do you understand these concepts? Even basic things like weighing two arguments or refuting an argument, a lot of us know how to do if we can use the word weighing or refutation, but we don't know how to do if we actually have to explain what is the meaning behind those words. And I think really that's the answer to this question. That if you fully understand the meaning behind these flow concepts, you should be able to break them down into lay terminology. So, for example, let's say I understand that I can weigh these two arguments, the one that I presented and the one that someone else presented, on magnitude, right? But I don't want to get up there in a Congress speech and say, oh, weigh these two arguments on magnitude. Mine is obviously way more important because no real senator inside the United States Congress speaks like that. Well, this really depends on, okay, do I understand what weighing on magnitude means? It means what is the most severe issue? What is the most important issue? And from there, I can then determine that, all right, I can weigh these arguments without actually saying weigh on magnitude. I can get up and say, my argument is obviously way more important than their argument, or lives matter more than money, or anything along those lines. And these are very simple ways of weighing that you've probably heard all around the circuit, but just have never registered. Wow, these are actually weighing. And the way that you finally put the icing on the cake and show the judge that, yes, I am weighing, but I'm doing it in a better way that's more accessible is by saying things along the lines of, this is why my argument is more important than theirs, or this is why you should prioritize my argument first and then their argument, or something along those lines, just to make it very explicitly clear that you are making a comparison between two different arguments. So that's the answer to that question. Basically, understand the terminology and you should be able to explain what's behind it. All right, next question. Do I believe in judge screws, or do I think that's just an excuse for not playing to a judge's paradigm? Um, I believe that there are scenarios where you could get quote unquote judge screwed because a certain judge is biased by their personal opinions or is in some way not judging the round properly. However, I would say that I think these happen far less than every debater tends to suggest they happen. In reality, I think that you can play to almost every single judge's paradigm. And I think that it is as noble and as honorable of a task for you as a debater to play to a lay judge's paradigm than it is for you to go super hard on the flow or for you to do whatever your personal style is. And basically, what that means is that no one as a debater is better or worse because of the style that they use. Rather, I think that specifically what we're looking at is how well does your style effectively convince me that you are the strongest speaker inside the room. And what that means is that you should be able to alter that style to play to the paradigm of what I think a strong speaker looks like, right? So for a lay judge, that might mean someone with very, very good rhetoric, someone with a very strong speaking style, someone with an authoritative presence. While with a flow judge, it might mean something more along the lines of a faster speaker that deals with more issues, someone that can handle the biggest content issues inside the round, someone that doesn't sugarcoat things but explains very clearly, this is what we're losing on, this is what we're winning on. And I think it's just as honorable for you to deal with both of those paradigms at different times. It's not like one is better than the other. And this is why I'm problematized by the concept of a judge screw, because it suggests that some judges are better than others, which I don't think is true. I think the entire purpose of debate is that you should be able to cater to both of those types of judges. So that's my response to this question. Okay, awesome. Now, let us take a few more of the fun questions. All right. Who do I believe is the GOAT in the NBA? I definitely think it is LeBron James. I don't think I've ever seen a player that can compete with LeBron James, and he's been to the finals a lot. So I think he's the GOAT. Let's see. What's the most odd thing that has happened to me inside a round or that I've seen happen inside a round? This is a tougher question. I think the oddest thing that I have seen happen inside a round was one time we were debating this piece of legislation about dealing with the Earth's global warming crisis. I think that the legislation proposed setting a year that we would have to be carbon zero or carbon free, and then basically like all United States companies would have to comply with that. Otherwise, they would have to pay a fine if they were not carbon free by that year. And I heard someone present the argument that the earth or that global warming is good for the earth because it motivates us to look towards space and start traveling towards space, which is then going to allow us to find extraterrestrial life. And I found that this argument was very odd because a solid 30 to 45 seconds was spent on the warranting of why supposedly global warming is going to push us into space and thus we're going to find more planets and whatnot. But the vast majority of the speech was spent on impacting out why finding aliens is good for the United States and good for the rest of the earth. So I found that one very, very interesting or very odd as well. Yeah. Okay. Um, what is a card? A card is just a piece of evidence. So a card is just another way to say that this is any particular piece of evidence. What we do is called cutting cards, which is where you take a entire article and then you cut the piece that you need, the particular piece of evidence that you're using for a speech, and then you put that into the speech. So that's what cutting cards is. Alrighty. Um, Why do I think POs win so much inside online debate? Okay, this is an interesting question. I definitely don't know the answer to this one completely, and it's something I've thought about a lot. But one thing that I think especially stands out here is that in online debate, it's a lot harder to set a presence, and I think that the PO really benefits here because by controlling that room, right? By directing all the speakers and by telling them, okay, this is when you're speaking, this is when you're questioning, this is how long your speech was. You may be seated, you may stand up, you may give your speech, right? All things along those lines. I think it's really easy for a PO to come off as a very authoritative figure, which obviously is true in normal debate. But this time, it's a lot harder for a lot of those speakers to come off as authoritative figures because it's a lot harder to establish a presence in online debate. And I think this really benefits POs that you have that ability to come off as a very authoritative, strong figure, someone that's controlling the room, someone that displays leadership skills, someone that you'd want to put in office, right? Someone that you'd want to vote for. And I think POs really benefit there because the rest of the speakers can't really get that presence across the same. So that's my theory, although I'm not entirely sure. I will say though that I agree that on in online debate there is a higher preponderance of POs winning rounds than I saw inside normal in-person debate. Okay. Um, how do you stand out in redundant debates like sending aid to the Northern Triangle when everyone just keeps going back and forth on corruption and stabilizing the region and people already address the main clashes in the debate before you? Okay, wow. Seems like you had a personal experience with this. So good. I like that y'all are asking these specific questions. Um, okay, so we'll talk about what I would do in this specific scenario, right? So this person says that in this debate, the redundancy was that everyone kept on going back and forth on whether or not corruption would result in the aid being stolen or misused, or whether aid is going to actually stabilize the region. And people are already addressing these main clashes before me. Now, what you should try to do in this scenario is think about innovative ways in which you can answer these questions for the judge. Okay? So let's think about what are innovative ways that we can answer it. One way that immediately stands out to me that I think that you could deal with these clashes is by saying by sending aid, you can stabilize the region, and thus corruption is not a problem in the first place because there's less terrorism inside the region. There's less people that want to steal the aid since there's more economic opportunities, and so on and so forth. So, this is the way of saying that one clash is more important than the other because it is a prerequisite. You could do this on the opposite side as well, right? You could say that stabilizing the region doesn't really matter because the only way you stabilize the region is if the aid gets to the people who need it, and the aid won't get to the people who need it because of corruption, right? That's one good way to answer it. You could also try to explain why one clash is going to continue reinforcing itself, right? So another innovative way to answer this might be that corruption is the biggest argument inside this round because the problem is when you send aid and it goes to corrupt actors or it's misused, they can start strengthening themselves. The region gets even more corrupt, and then call back the thing I just said about prerequisites in terms of the stabilizing the region. So if these corrupt actors continuously just keep strengthening themselves, then you can never actually stabilize the region because they'll keep on getting stronger. There's more instability in the region, and they'll just keep stealing more aid. So thus, there's a never-ending cycle, and that's why backlash in particular is more important. So basically, that's the specific answer to this question. But the general answer to this question is that you have to explain why is one clash the most important? Why is it what wins or loses the round, right? And you need to have an innovative take on that, right? Even if it's a redundant issue of everyone going back and forth on corruption, give me a creative take on the corruption debate, right? What is a creative way to look at this and think about, okay, this is one way that I could frame this debate in a more interesting fashion, in a more unique fashion. And that's exactly what you're trying to do there. Okay. How do you rehash and get away with it? Okay, this is a bit more of a fun question. I think that you obviously should not rehash in the first place, but we obviously end up in scenarios where every now and then you prep something and everyone else takes what you prep, right? So I want to actually pair this question with another question that was asked about how do you prep in round, because nowadays y'all have the luxury of being able to use the internet in round, which helps a lot. So this is why I think rehash really is not very acceptable inside the modern day debate spectrum, because when you have the ability to use the internet, there's no reason for you to be rehashing. So that's my first answer here. In terms of how do you rehash and get away with it, just don't rehash and use the internet to research, right? Now, that being said, some tournaments don't allow the internet. Maybe you don't have access to the internet. There's a wealth of scenarios, and you still have to deal with those scenarios, right? So in those scenarios, you want to be able to explain to me the connection between the arguments presented and the round, right? So, one good way to present the same argument, but add a new twist to it is explain how does it implicate the round, right? Someone might tell me that aid is going to be stolen and thus corrupt actors will get stronger, but you need to explain to me how does that apply to the round, right? So this implication would be if it's stolen by corrupt actors, then the AF can't get their benefits of it improving or stabilizing the region, right? Or if it's stolen by corrupt actors, then these corrupt actors get stronger, meaning that everyone else's impacts on the neg are way stronger because of the argument I presented, or something like that, right? So basically, if you're presenting the same arguments, try to implicate it to the round more and explain to me, okay, how does this really apply to the round? Why does it make sense in terms of the context of the round as to why it's important? Okay, cool. Now, there are some debaters that just seem to carry an aura. Is that because of their clout, or is that because of something they're deliberately doing? And then a follow up question: how do you carry that aura into an online world where body language is pretty non existent? Okay, very good. So, in terms of the first question, yes, I think it is somewhat based on your clout, or at least what I would say is that popularity makes it easier to develop an aura. That being said, I don't think that is the only factor behind developing an aura, and I don't think that is a prerequisite for developing an aura. I just think it's something that makes it easier, right? If you want to develop a presence, right, have that aura around me that a lot of y'all have probably seen debaters have, it all starts with confidence, right? You have to be confident that your arguments are strong. You have to be confident that you are a strong speaker. You have to be confident that you can rank in any round, right? No matter how good the people in the round are, at your best, you can always compete with them. And that type of unwavering confidence, right? In all odds, you are still confident, is what develops this aura, right? It's what develops this mindset and this presence that you have that, okay, I can succeed in any round, and everyone else is going to look at me and say, wow, that's someone that I'm worried about. That's someone that I think can succeed, and something along those lines. So you really want to be confident. That's kind of the way that you carry this aura. Now, confidence, as you all probably know, is very dependent on body language, right? Like how you walk, how you carry yourself, things along those lines, right? It's someone can look confident, and that's basically based upon their body language, right? So how do you carry that aura into an online world where body language is very non-existent? Okay, this is a very good question. This is something that I've definitely thought a lot about, and honestly, I don't have the best answer for. However, what I would tell you is that in an online world, it seems like we are more dealing with confidence based upon things that you say, based upon the way that you interact with people, and things along those lines, right? Now, I want to be very clear here. There is a difference between being confident and being rude, being arrogant, things along those lines, right? None of those are acceptable. You should not be any of those. However, being confident means that you believe in yourself, you trust in yourself. You say the way that you talk suggests that, okay, I actually think that I'm here for a reason, right? I'm having fun here. I can compete here, things along those lines. So I think that's really how you carry that aura, sorry, into an online world where now every single time you are asking a question, have that tone of confidence behind you. Even on simple things, when you're motioning, have that confidence. When you're addressing the chamber, when you're caucusing before the round, all things like that, you need to make sure that you come off extra confident now. Again, not arrogant, nothing along those lines, but just confident in that you believe in yourself, because that way you can carry that aura, that presence into an online world. Awesome. Okay. Now I will take the very last question, which is actually I'll take two questions. So one of them is if the fate of the universe is on the line, who am I having taking the game winning shot? It's obviously LeBron James. There's no question there for me. I don't think any other answer can really compete, or any other player, I should say, can really compete with LeBron. Okay. And the last question I'll answer is questions about rhetoric, right? So there's three big questions that I kind of want to group here. A, for tournaments with a lot of bills, how do you manage to prep efficiently and add a good amount of rhetoric for each bill? Okay. Question number two, how do I get good at rhetoric so I can beat POs? Okay, blunt, but very good. I'll answer this question. And question number three, when you flip it around, how do you preserve intros and rhetoric? Okay, all of these questions can be answered using the same response, which is that you have to be able to develop rhetoric that you can come up with off the top of your head, right? Off the cuff of your sleeve, where when you're speaking, just out of nowhere, you can come up with good rhetoric lines, right? So that answers all of these questions, because it means that when you're prepping bills, it's very easy to come up with rhetoric. Or even if you don't put in rhetoric while you're prepping it, you can come up with it in the round, right? While you're speaking, even if you have to, right? Okay, when you flip it round, how do you preserve intros and rhetoric? You try your best to preserve it, right? Maybe try to like find the opposite and then say that like the opposite is true or something like that. Certain things you can't preserve though, and you have to be able to come up with rhetoric quickly and efficiently, right? Rhetoric that's actually good. Same thing about how do you like get good at rhetoric so you can beat POs or whatever, right? Exact same concept. Have good rhetoric that you can come up with off the top of your head quickly, right? So that way you don't have to waste a whole bunch of time that you could be spending prepping, cutting cards, things along those lines, coming up with rhetoric, but you still have some. And the best drill here is that you should look at your speeches, understand the argument you're presenting, flip your speech upside down, and then try to give it with rhetoric included, right? This is going to work on your extemporaneous speaking, which is really good for developing this rhetoric because you have to be able to speak off the top of your head in the first place. But then, secondarily, it's also going to work on those skills of developing rhetoric quickly, right? Apart from just extemporaneous speaking, the actual ability to make the rhetoric itself. And that's an entirely different skill. So, that skill is also really well worked on by this drill, in which you pretty much just pick up speeches, understand what the argument is, flip the speech over, then present the argument with rhetoric included. And there's variations of this drill where you don't read the evidence, you focus specifically starting on reading the evidence, you focus only on the impact, things along those lines. And you could do any of those variations. Those will help you. Okay, cool. This was a whole lot of fun. I appreciate y'all sending in a lot of your debate questions. I'd love to help out. If y'all ever have any more questions, you can feel free to DM the Ascend Speech account on Instagram, or DM any of us owners or coaches personally and say, okay, I have this question. Would you mind helping me with it? Or would you mind talking to me about it? Or anything along those lines. And we'll all be happy to help you. With that being said, I will catch all of y'all later. Peace out.